Good day to you, friends. We're going to see today, in continuing on the life of King David, how his life embodies the hand of God and how he watches over his life. He defeats David's enemies. God's hand giving him strategies to defeat the enemies, and he in his way and how he helps him navigate being called and ordained as a man of war. Today's no exception. Oh, God answers David's prayer and giving him divine protection and removing stumbling blocks. Oh, but today, friends, there's one stumbling block that God removes from David, but it's going to cost him deep despair, because this is someone close to David's heart. We left off last time where Absalom returned from Jerusalem after hiding from killing his brother, and David's cold welcome and anger made Absalom all the more desirous to dethrone King David, his father. So he sets up at the gate and he, politically in a sense, wins the charisma of the people. But what he did was he basically split David's kingdom by his charisma. So David here is on the run. We're going to pick up at 2 Samuel 16. We're going to see here that, David had some friends, but there's some people here, and a man by the name of Ziba that turns against him, one of David's friends, and he lies and he deceives him. 2 Samuel 16, verse 1. Now when David had passed a little beyond the summit, behold, Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, met him with a couple of saddled donkeys, and on them were 200 loaves of bread, 100 clusters of raisin, 100 summer fruits, and a jug of wine. And the king said to Ziba, "Why do you have all these?" And Ziba said, "The donkeys are for the king's household to ride, and the bread and summer fruit for the young men to eat, and the wine for whoever is faint in the wilderness." So he meets David with essential supplies. But here's where the deception comes in. Then the king said, "And where is your master's son?" Meaning Mephibosheth. And Ziba said to the king, "Behold, he is staying in Jerusalem. For he said, today the house of Israel will restore the kingdom of my father to me," which was not true. So the king said to Ziba, "Behold, all that belongs to Mephibosheth is yours." And Ziba said, "I prostrate myself. Let me find favor in your sight, O Lord the king." So David's believing that Mephibosheth is wanting power, but it's not the truth at all. Ziba told him a lie. Mephibosheth was actually in Jerusalem waiting. He's trying to tell him that he's waiting in Jerusalem to come to power after David and Absalom basically fight it out. And they end up ruining each other, in a sense, is what he's saying. And he's saying that Ziba's lying and saying that Mephibosheth is longing to restore the family of Saul to power. So David says, no, all that he has, all that Mephibosheth has is yours. So he's thinking he's telling the truth, but again, you got another friend turning against David through all this. So Ziba here, wickedly, what is he doing? He's using a crisis of what David's facing on the run from his own son. He's using this crisis for his own benefit. Got a lot of scoundrels during that time. Got a lot of deceptive people during that time. So verse 5. When King David came to Barum, behold, there came out from there a man of the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shimei, the son of Gera, he came out cursing continually. So a man from the house of Saul, this is probably a distant relative of King Saul, but he resented David for replacing the dynasty of Saul. So he comes out, he's cussing at him, very, very angry. And he threw stones at David. And all the servants of King David and all the people and all the mighty men were at his right hand and his left. And thus Shimei said when he cursed, get out, you man of bloodshed and worthless fellow. So he's cussing at him. And Shimei, and then the Lord has, verse 8, the Lord has returned upon you all the bloodshed of the house of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. And the Lord has given the kingdom into the hand of your son Absalom. And behold, you are taken in your own evil. You are a man of bloodshed. This is what this man is telling him. Shimei was wrong, though, in the sense that David, he treated Saul and his family with great graciousness, if you can remember in the past broadcasts. It was Saul, actually, not David, that brought his own family to ruin. And here this guy is saying, you're a man of bloodshed. It's all your fault. And that wasn't the case at all. So the Lord did bring upon David this calamity and what he's going through. But it wasn't for the reasons that Shimei thought. David is under correction and under a rebuke from the Lord for what he did to Bathsheba. His own son now is coming against him, trying to get the throne. Sin has a cost, friends. Then verse 9. Then Abishai, the son of Jerusalem, said to the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord, the king? Let me go over and cut his head off. So Abishai is seeing this man from the dynasty of Saul cussing David. And he said, I'll cut his head off. How dare him talk to the king that way, is what he's saying. He's ready to kill him. But you know, David was willing to hear what God might say through this cursing critic. It's one thing David knew. God is able to speak through the good times and through the bad times. So he knew at this time, he knew God was able to speak even when a critic was speaking here. David saw the hand of God in every circumstance. God could shut up Shimei. He knew God would have the ability to shut him up, but maybe God had something to say even through this critic, is what he's saying here for King David. So again, 2 Samuel 16, verse 10. But the king said, what have I to do with you, O sons of Jeruzzai? If he curses, and if the Lord has told him, curse David, then who shall say, why have you done so? Then David said to Abishai and to all his servants, behold, my son who came out from me seeks my life. How much more now this Benjamite? Let him alone and let him curse, for maybe the Lord has told him. So let him alone, let him curse me, maybe the Lord, through all this, because my son's coming after me, Absalom. Maybe through all this, God wants to tell me something, David's saying. Perhaps the Lord will look on my affliction and return good to me instead of this cursing. So David had a hope that maybe through all this, God would have mercy and pity on him like he had in the past. So David and his men went on their way, and Shimei went along on the hillside parallel with him, and he went and cursed and cast stones at him. And the king and all the people who were with him arrived weary, and he refreshed himself there. So David knew the hand of God in his future. David knew God's hand was able to work mightily through him. In his past, he did it, and he's able to do this in the present. God, he knew he just had that understanding. Friends, do you have that understanding that God, because of the past victories or the way he's brought you out of situations and circumstances, allow that, friends, to build your faith up? when you're going through hard times, look back at the grace and the mercy of God and just say, Lord, I know. I don't see it now, but I know your grace and mercy can bail me out. You did it before. I know you can do it again. So it's saying in the end there that they refresh themselves. David receives comfort and he's at peace. You know, he knows God's in control. Friends, you can have peace surpassing understanding in the middle of a seeming emotional war zone that you're going through when you know who your God is. Strengthen yourself in good times. You know why? You fortify yourself in knowing God's goodness. So when the bottom drops out in your life, because that's just the vicissitudes we face in life. We're up one day, we're down the next. It's just the way life is, ebbs and flows. But in the good times, you build yourself up. David had a tenure now. He's probably 60 years old now. But all the while, when he was out as a shepherd boy, he learned the faithfulness of God. When he defeated Goliath, and he using this now at age 60, when his own son is coming against him, he's going to end up finding still refreshment and understanding that God will take care of me. So David, he's in the midst right now. These are hard days for him, though. These are days of humiliation and shame that he's facing. Oh, the sin that he did with Bathsheba, he's seemingly paying it with his family. So through it all, though, he was a man after God's heart, because he didn't even want to shut the critic up, because he said maybe God can speak even through this evil man. He had that much faith and hope in God. And then verse 15 of 2 Samuel 16, right in the middle of this. Then Absalom and all the people, the men of Israel, entered Jerusalem, and Ahithophel with him. So what's happening here is now there's going to be a war breaking out here. And Absalom and all the men of Israel are entering Jerusalem en route to try to attack David. Now it came about when Hushai, the Archite, David's friend, came to Absalom, that Hushai said to Absalom, long live the king, long live the king. So what's happening here is Hushai wanted to leave with David and support him. He wanted to support him and be around him, but David thought it was going to be better to send him back to Absalom and pretend to be friends with Absalom so that he can actually spy on him and give him advice of what's going on. So Hushai is telling Absalom, long live the king, long live the king. Verse 17, and Absalom said to Hushai, is this your loyalty to your friend? Why did you not go with your friend? Then Hushai said to Absalom, no, for whom the Lord this people and all the men of Israel have chosen, his will I be, and with him I will remain. So we say, no, I want to be with you. You're the one. Long live the king, he's saying. So he's really wanting to help out David as a spy, but he's trying to spy here. And so he's faking with Absalom, saying, no, I want to be with you. Long live the king. And besides, he's saying, Hushai, whom should I serve? Should I not serve in the presence of his son? As I have served in your father's presence, so I will be in your presence. So he's saying here, I will be in your presence. I will serve you. Verse 20, then Absalom said to Ahithophel, give your advice. What shall we do? Now Ahithophel had a lot of wisdom when it came to battle. And so he's saying, what's your advice? And Ahithophel said to Absalom, go into your father's concubines, whom he has left to keep the house, and all Israel will hear that you have made yourself odious to your father. The hands of all who are with him will also be strengthened. So here you've got Ahithophel that deflects to Absalom's side, and he's telling him the 10 concubines that he left behind, go into your father's concubines. A disgraceful thing, you know, so offensive, beyond this, the immoral act, the offense of it. so offensive. Must have been one of the most offensive things you can do, go into these 10 concubines that he's saying here. In ancient Israel, you know, the king's concubines, if you took the king's concubines and if they were violated anyway, it was like an act of treason. So he's telling him, do this immoral act. It's a way for Absalom to completely deny his father. So Ahithophel is telling him, do this heinous act. So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof, and Absalom went into his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. What a despicable thing that would happen here. Right on the rooftop, the same rooftop that David looked out and saw Bathsheba and ended up committing adultery with her. Same rooftop. And the advice of Ahithophel, which he gave in those days, as if one inquired of the word of God, was so that the advice of Ahithophel was regarded by both David and Absalom. So you're seeing over here this wicked act having occurred here. And pitching a tent, going into his father's concubines. What a weird satisfaction it would have been for Absalom to do this hideous thing. So, you know, unbelievable. It shows, though, how, if we can look at what's happening here, it shows the degradation of what people will go through to do anything. But you know what? God's going to keep his promise to David through this all. And you know what God said, and it's sad, but I'm going to read 2 Samuel 12, verses 11 through 12. And this is what God said to David as a result of what he did to Bathsheba and killing Uriah. He said this, "Thus says the Lord, behold, I will raise up evil against you from your own household. I will even take your wives before your eyes and give them to your companion, and he shall lie with your wives in broad daylight." God predicted that when David, back in 2 Samuel 12, violated Bathsheba and killed Uriah. So he's saying, I'm going to give, and he shall lie with your wives in broad daylight. Indeed, you did it in secret, but I will do this thing before all Israel and under the sun. So they said here, when this act was done with the 10 concubines on the rooftop, everybody saw this disgrace happening. You know, God is a God of mercy and he's loving, but he's also a God where consequences happen. That's why we got to be very careful. And so Ahithophel's advice to Absalom was motivated by bitterness. Bitterness, friends, turns any qualities that we have sour. Bitterness of heart can make us do the worst things unimaginable. But that's what happens here. And so we're looking at now Psalm 3. David wrote these Psalms in the course of his life. And I'm tracing some of the Psalms that he wrote in various periods of his life. And in Psalm 3, David says this, "O Lord, how my adversaries have increased. Many are rising up against me. Many are saying of my soul, there is no deliverance for him in God. But thou, O Lord, art a shield about me, my glory, and the one who lifts my head. I was crying to the Lord with my voice, and he answered me from the holy mountain. I lay down and slept. I awoke, for the Lord sustains me. I will not be afraid of 10,000s of people who have set themselves around about me. Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God, for thou hast smitten all my enemies on the cheek. Thou hast scattered the teeth of the wicked. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Thy blessing be upon thy people." So David here reflects in his life, and this is a period of time where even his friends are coming up against him. His own son is coming against him. He's at a low point in his life, and he's reflecting in various psalms and points. And there's another psalm I want to read, Psalm 22, that David wrote. And I'm going to read verses 1 through 21. It says this, where a cry of anguish from a song of David. It says this, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Far from my deliverance are the words of my groaning. So yes, David did have faith and trust in God, but there's times as a human being, he felt weak. He felt frail. He felt the vulnerability that you and me face, friends. We face vulnerabilities. Doesn't mean because we love the Lord that we don't have weak times. It doesn't mean because we love God and we're seasoned in the Lord that we don't come through times where we cry out and we just get in anguish. That's where David is here. Oh my God, I cry out by day, but thou dost not answer. And by night, but I have no rest. Yet thou art holy. Thou art enthroned upon the praises of Israel. So you see him kind of at a crossroad between deep despair and between reflecting on the goodness. And he's kind of bobbling in the middle here, and he's crying out to God. Yet thou art holy. Thou art enthroned upon the praises of Israel. In thee our fathers trusted. They trusted, and thou didst deliver them. To thee they cried out and were delivered. In thee they trusted and were not disappointed. But I am a worm and not a man. So he knew, he's looking at himself as, who am I, O God? A reproach of men and despised by the people. He's finding, even as a leader of the king of Israel, he's being despised now. People are turning against him. But I am a worm, he's saying. All the people who see me sneer at me. They separate with the lip. They wag the head, saying, commit yourself to the Lord. Let him deliver him. Let him rescue him, because he delights in him. Yet thou art he who didst bring me forth from the womb. Thou didst make me trust upon my mother's breasts. Upon thee I was cast from birth. Thou hast been my God from my mother's womb. So he's also in this point of despair, reflecting on God and on his goodness. Be not far from me, for trouble is near. For there is none to help. Many bulls have surrounded me. Strong bulls of Bashan have enriched me. So he's seeing all these people around me are surrounding me. They open wide their mouth at me as a ravening and roaring lion. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted within me. My strength is dried up like a potsherd. And that's where he's at right now. He's at the point of where his strength is getting very diminished, and they're coming after him. And my tongue cleaves to my jaws, and thou dost lay me in the dust of the death. For dogs have surrounded me. A band of evildoers have encompassed me. They pierce my hands and my feet. I can count all my bones. They look, they snare at me. They divide my garments among them, and my clothing they cast lots. But thou, O Lord, be not far off. Thou art my help. Hasten my assistance. So he's saying through all this, they're coming after me. Help, Lord. That's what you need to say sometimes. Help, Lord. People are coming after me. I don't see the way out. Day after day, I'm going through this hard. Help me, Lord. That's what you say. You say like David, help me, Father. But thou, O Lord, is not be far off. O thou, my help, hasten to my assistance. Deliver my soul from the sword. Be only life from the power of the dog. Save me from the lion's mouth and from the horns of the wild oxen. Thou dost answer me. So he's praying, dear God. So you see, this is David's prayer out of the despair of what he's going through in this point of life. And the lowest point, got to be the lowest point of his life, where his own son is coming after him for the throne. So you look now at 2 Samuel chapter 17. Furthermore, Ahithophel, who's now with Absalom, said to Absalom, which Ahithophel was when he was on David's side, he was a man that had great strategy. It was one that David could bank on. Anything he said, it was very wise, his strategy. So now Ahithophel is going on Absalom's side. He's deflected from David. So Ahithophel said to Absalom, after he already gave him that disgusting advice to lay with 10 concubines in broad daylight so everyone can see it. So he's further given him advice. Please let me choose 12,000 men that I may arise and pursue David tonight. And I will come upon him while he is weary and exhausted. And I will terrify him that all the people who are with him will flee. And I will strike down the king alone. And I will bring back all the people to you and return to everyone. Depends on the man you seek. Then all the people shall be at peace. So the plan pleased Absalom and the elders of Israel. So he's really telling them a good plan. It's a good plan. I'll get him when he's weary, he's tired, he's exhausted. I'll attack him at night. And it really is probably really good advice. And Absalom is pleased with this advice, but you know what? Even though it is probably the best war advice that could be given at the time, God is sovereign. And God is looking after David. And God's protecting David. So through this all, God, you're going to see, is going to confuse the enemy. And because you know what? He turns hearts. It's in the Bible where he turns hearts, king's hearts, the way he wishes it to do. So what happens here is, even though it's good advice, Ahithophel has a plan of taking 12,000 men and pursuing David at night when he's exhausted. Yeah, it is good advice. Initially, it's really good advice. But in God's sovereign plan on David's life, he's going to default that. The hand of God, you're going to see, is going to be in a situation where Hushai is going to end up giving some advice. And when David sends spies over, he's going to, let me read it here. Verse 5, then Absalom said, now call Hushai the archetype also, and let us hear what he has to say. When Hushai had come to Absalom, Absalom said to him, now remember, Hushai is pretending to be on Absalom's side, but David's sending him over as a spy. So Hushai is going to try to give him advice, but is going to try to give David actually more time to gather his men. So when Hushai came to Absalom, Absalom said to him, Ahithophel has spoken, thus shall we carry out his plan? If not, you speak. So Hushai said to Absalom, this time the advice of Ahithophel had given is not good. So Hushai is saying, no, it's not good. This is not good advice. And so what you see here is he's saying it's too risky. Don't do that. Don't attack David immediately is what he's going to be saying here. So his advice is he wants to gather all Israel. That's the advice Hushai is going to give him. Gather all Israel. But when he's saying gather all Israel, and in other words, Absalom, gather all your men, it's going to give David more time before the attack so David can counterattack. And so it's going to give him more time. And he's going to say, let Absalom go to battle. Well, this is going to strike Absalom's chord because Absalom wants to be the hero. Just like his father would ride gallantly in the battle, Absalom thinks he can do the same thing. So it's going to flatter him. So verse 8, moreover, Hushai said, you know your father and his men, that they are mighty men and they are fierce like a bear robbed of her cubs in the field. So he's saying, you know David's strong and mighty, but the reality is Hushai knew he was actually wearing down. David was actually tired, but he's trying to give him the deception of back at the time when David was at his strength, when he was strong and mighty. So he's saying, you know how fierce he would be. And your father is an expert in warfare and will not spend the night with the people. Behold, he has now hidden himself in one of the caves or in another place, and it will be when he falls on them at the first attack that whoever hears it will say, there has been a slaughter among the people who follow Absalom. And even the one who is valiant, whose heart is like the heart of a lion, will completely lose heart. So even those that are on David's side are going to flee and they're going to lose heart, is what he's saying. And all Israel knows that your father is mighty, and the man who are with him are valiant men. So Hushai is going to advise him, Absalom, he's going to want Absalom to take over. If it was Ahithophel's plan, if Ahithophel's plan was going to come through, Ahithophel would be the one to lead in battle at nighttime and to get him when he's weary, which probably was the good plan. But it was defected by the sovereignty of God, because in Hushai's plan, Absalom was going to lead the battle, and this was something Absalom wanted to do, to be the hero over here. And so, but I counsel that all Israel will surely be gathered to you from Dan even to Beersheba, and the sand that is by the sea in abundance, so that you personally go to battle. So Absalom is getting puffed up. He's, oh yeah, I'm going to go to battle here. So it shall come to him in one of the places where he can be found, and we will fall on him as the dew falls on the ground, and of him and all the men who are with him, not even one will be left. So this is supposed to be a plan that sounds appealing to Absalom, but it's actually going to be the plan of God that's going to end up trapping him. And even if he withdraws into the city, saying that all Israel shall bring ropes to that city, and we shall drag him into the valley until not even a small stone is found there. So it sounds like it's promising that if we do this with good old Absalom leading the way, then we're going to have victory. In verse 14, that Absalom and all the men of Israel said, the counsel of Hushai the Archite is better than the counsel of Ahithophel, which, because that was God, it was God's way of turning it. For the Lord has ordained to thwart the good counsel of Ahithophel, in order that the Lord might bring calamity on Absalom. So God protected David. Absalom, yes, he had the smartest strategy. That would have been the smartest strategy to do this. But David's prayer, David prays, and David's prayer was mightier than Ahithophel's intelligence. And God had it where all the people looked at Hushai's advice rather than Ahithophel, who always had good, accurate advice. But this was God's way of deflecting it, so that way Absalom would end up losing. So friends, prayer, this is a testament that prayer moves the hand of God. And David prayed. That means if all forces are against you, and you could say, there's no way I can come out of this. I'm outnumbered. I'm outsmarted. Everything, I'm at odds. There's no way I could ever see the light or ever rise, because all these things seem to be against me. This is a testament, friends, that when God is in it and God is for you, who can be against you? God is for you. So God is intercepting all this, and he's allowing the people to listen to Hushai's advice that's going to trap Absalom and cause his demise. So during David's time of chastening, even though David was in a time of chastening and rebuke from God from the sins that he did, where he said the sword of your house will never leave, and David's going through this, God's hand is still on him. He's not out to destroy him, but God's hand was to correct him and to bring him to a better place, ultimately. And so what ends up happening here? We have Hushai then, that tells Zadok and Abiathar, because Hushai is really a spy. So he tells Zadok and Abiathar to tell David to cross over the Jordan River, which is going to basically give him time to regroup before Absalom's attack. So you got two messengers. They hide out at Rogel, and there's a servant girl there that relays intelligence to them, and she's going to tell them everything that's happening about Absalom. So she's going to give them intelligence. So they take the news. So these messengers are going to take the news then to King David. But what you have here is a young lad. They see the messengers, and they end up, and he tells Absalom what's going on. So these messengers are having to flee, and they end up hiding in a courtyard well, because they know Absalom knows now. But thank God, God always sends provision. There's a homeowner's wife there that protects them, by placing these messengers in a well, and she covers it. So when they come by to look, she say, no, they've already gone over the river. So she deflects it. And God, you know, I'm almost reminded, it's like when God sent a raven to feed Elijah in the cave when he was hiding out. God will send provision, friends, for you. God sends provision your way, anyway, unusual ways. Here's a homeowner, happened to come, they come to this place and the homeowner is willing to protect them. Think about Rahab, how she hired, how she hid the spies. Think about all these people that God is able to orchestrate. And so when the danger passes, the messengers then, they climb out of the well and they deliver the news to David. So David has some intelligence of what's going on. And, you know, David is a man of war. So David, even in his weariness, he's had time to gather and he knows how to war and how to strategize. So David and all the men are going to cross over the Jordan River here. And in verse 23 of 2 Samuel 17:23, now when Ahithophel saw that his counsel was not followed, he saddled his donkey and arose and went to his home, to his city, and set his house in order and strangled himself. Thus he died and was buried in the grave of his father. My God, here's Ahithophel's life. At first, he was David's right-arm man. Now he deflects to Saul's side, probably angry about what David did to Bathsheba. So he deflects to Saul's side. And so what ends up happening here is now Ahithophel sees, he saw the counsel wasn't followed, and he ends up seeing the reality of what's going to go on. He knew Hushai's plans. He knew they're going to fail. And so him being a strategizer and understanding war, he knows he knows it's going to lose, and David's going to get victory. And if David gets the victory, he realizes David's going to execute him for treason. And that's what would happen at the time. So Ahithophel, what does he do? He strangles himself. He kills himself because he knows it's just a matter of time before David wins. So verse 24, then David came to Mahanaim. Absalom crossed the Jordan, he and all the men of Israel with him. And Absalom set Amasa over the army in place of Joab. Now Amasa was the son of a man whose name was Ithra the Israelite, who went to Abigail, the daughter of Nahash, the sister of Jeruzai, Joab's mother. And Israel and Absalom camped in the land of Gilead. So Absalom is the head of Israel's army here. And he makes Amasa captain instead of Joab. And so what's happening? Then you're going to end up having three obscure men. The name of Shobai, Machir, and Barzillai. These three, they're obscure men, basically. But what they do, again, they provide food, bedding, and supplies for David and his men. Right in the time of need. Friend, God will meet you right at your time of need. It may not be when you want it. He may not come when you want it, but he'll be there right on time. That's the way our God is. So he sends provision, but these are obscure men. They're not really well-known men in battle or anything. But you know, God sends anyone. God sends anyone to do what he's got to do to help. So he's sending them. This was actually the provision of God to comfort David in the middle of his affliction. Remember, friends, how God works, how he's worked in other people's lives, how he's worked in your life. God is for you. You can bank on that. He's going to help you out. So he's sending these obscure men to give him food. And so 2 Samuel 18, verse 1, then David numbered the people who were with him, and set over them commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds. So he's setting out people in 3 divisions under Joab, Abishai, and Ittai. He's going to send out 3 different divisions of people. And David sent the people out, 1/3 under the commander of Joab, 1/3 under the command of Abishai and the son of Jeruziah and Joab's brother, and 1/3 under the command of Ittai the Gittite. And the king said to the people, I myself will surely go out with you also. So David is willing now. He's willing to go to battle. I'll go out with you. I'm setting up 3 divisions. Let me go with you. But the people said, you should not go out, for if indeed we flee, they will not care about us. Even if half of us die, they will not care about us. But you are worth 10,000 of us. Therefore, now is better that you ready to help us from the city. Then the king said to them, whatever seems best to you, I will do. So the king stood beside the gate, and all the people went out by hundreds and thousands. So David was willing to go to war, but the people are saying, no, you're worth way more as our king and our leader. You're worth more than thousands of people. We can't afford to lose you, is what they're saying. So David stayed back, and David would be there to send them more. If they needed more reserves and they needed more people, David would be able to bring them more people for battle. And also, it's going to be hard. Think about it, David. It would have been hard for David to go out there and fight against his own son in battle. So think about that. This is not a typical war. This is a war going on. David and his son that got all these people against him, trying to itch for the throne here. So the people went out by hundreds and thousands, and they were willing. David had some loyal people beside him, and they were willing to sacrifice themselves for the danger and the benefit of their king. Friends, are you loyal to people? What about our King of Kings and Lord of Lords? Can we be loyal to our King of Kings and Lord of Lords in the sense that we love God? You know, God says, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. And what does that mean? That, friends, that means that we don't want to hurt the heart of God. We saw, if you studied any of these videos that I've done, and you can catch them on YouTube, my YouTube channel, if you haven't seen any of the past ones as well. But it's saying there that you can bank on the fact that God is for you. Who can be against you? When you love God, though, with all your heart, it grieves the heart of God. It grieves your soul. David, we found in a lot of the Psalms that he wrote, he cried out, oh God, blot out these transgressions from me. It grieved his heart when he sinned. God knew David, even though he sinned with Bathsheba, he was deeply repentant. So, you've got here, being faithful. Faithful is so vital, friends. So you've got these people that are faithful to their king. And when we think of our King of Kings, be faithful to him. And how do we be faithful? God says, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. That's what you do, friends. And if you sin, you ask for repentance with your heart. That's what you do, friends. And God will honor that. So, verse 5, 2 Samuel 18:5. And the king charged Joab and Abishai and Ittai, saying, deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom. And all the people heard when the king charged the commanders concerning Absalom. So I think David knew in his wisdom he was going to get victory. But what he's telling these generals is he's saying, be gentle with Absalom. In other words, don't kill my son. Don't kill him. You can capture him, but don't mistreat him in any way. And he said it loudly so everyone would know. So he had a sensitivity. May have been a strange relationship, but he still, as a father, had a sensitivity for his son. And he's saying, even though he knew he was going to have the victory in this battle, he's saying, don't touch Absalom. Don't mistreat him in any way. Then the people went out into the field against Israel, and the battle took place and the forest of Ephraim. And the people of Israel were defeated there before the servants of David. And the slaughter there that day was great, 20,000 men. So David, there's a great, huge victory that he's having here. So for the battle there was spread over the whole countryside, and the forest devoured more people that day than the sword devoured. So man, you've got people fighting here. Loyalty of David. The loyalty of David against Israel, because Israel seduced Absalom. Absalom's charisma and Absalom's power. Think about it. Think about it, friends. How Absalom and how he would use his cunning, charisma, how he uses power. But David ends up having to fight against Israel because Absalom divided his kingdom that he once had. They were all for David, but Absalom divided it. So you've got some people that used to be under David, now under Absalom. So, but David defeated them, and it talks about how 20,000 men and more were defeated in the forest. It's saying David gets this overwhelming victory. You know why? God was for him. God was for him. So the woods devoured more people that day than the sword, it's saying. God fought for David in unusual ways. God knew the deception that was happening in Absalom's life. And think about it. They perished, though, more in the woods. So how did they perish? These thick oaks under tangled briars, they're perishing. The enemy's falling into pits, so to speak. Into swamps they would fall. And then they were hewn down by David's men. So in the forest, more of them were devoured, it's talking about, than the sword devoured them. So, but then we have here in verse 9, now Absalom happened to meet the servants of David, for Absalom was riding on his mule, and the mule went under the thick branches of a great oak, and his head caught fast in the oak, and he was left hanging between heaven and earth, while the mule was under him, kept going. So here's Absalom riding, and you know, he thinks he's this big warrior, but where is he? He's a warrior riding on a mule? Give me a break. Well, anyway, he's riding on a mule, and his thick hair, here he was prized for his looks, and his thick hair, the very hair that was esteemed by people, ends up being his downfall. It gets caught. It gets caught in a tree. And so he finds himself hanging there, and the mule is still going. So the mule takes off, and here he's hanging here by himself. When a certain man saw it, he told Joab and said, "Behold, I saw Absalom hanging in an oak." So we know that David told them, don't kill Absalom, don't kill him, don't mistreat him in any way. But when Joab sees that, then Joab said to the man who had told him, "Now behold, you saw him. Why then didn't you strike him there to the ground? I would have given you 10 pieces of silver and a belt." So Joab really goes against David's commands. And he's saying, why didn't you strike? Look, if you would have struck him, I would give you a military belt. That's an ornament. A highly prized soldier's ornament would have been a military belt of victory. And Joab is saying, why didn't you strike him down? I would have given that to you. So, verse 12, and the man said to Joab, "Even if I should receive 1,000 pieces of silver in my hand, I would not put out my hand against my king's son. For in our hearing, the king charged you and Abishai and Ittai, saying, 'Protect me from the young man Absalom.'" So this man is saying, no matter how much money you would have given me, no matter what glorious belt you would have given me, I would never go and cross what the king said. You heard the king saying, don't kill Absalom. So what happens here? Verse 13, Otherwise, if I had dealt treacherously against his life, and there is nothing hidden from the king, then you yourself would have stood aloof. Then Joab's listening to this, but Joab said, I will not waste time here with you. So he took 3 spears in his hand and thrust them through the heart of Absalom when he was yet alive in the midst of the oak. So Joab goes against David's wishes and he kills Absalom, because I think he realizes through this all, it's not worth keeping Absalom alive through all this of what's going through here. And the young men who carried Joab's armor gathered around and struck Absalom and killed him. So you got more people striking him, killing him, making sure he's dead here. Then Joab blew the trumpet, and the people returned from pursuing Israel, for Joab restrained the people. So here we got Absalom dead. Who, by what? Really by the sovereign hand of God. That's what it's really by, friends. God is sovereign. Nothing happens that isn't first understood. Everything is under his understanding. And so God sets this up where Absalom's going to ride in a mule, and Absalom's going to get his hair caught, because God is not a man that's going to be mocked. God knows that God is going to protect David. So in this way, God, in a sense, kills Absalom using Joab and using the servants to end his life finally. And then verse 17, and they took Absalom and cast him into a deep pit in the forest and erected over him a very great heap of stones, and all Israel fled, each to his tent. So they took Absalom, they're casting him into a pit. Why? So no one's going to memorialize him. No one's going to think that they're going to end up becoming a future rebel because they're memorializing, oh, Absalom was a great warrior. No, they buried him in a pit and covered stones over him. And then verse 18. Now Absalom in his lifetime had taken and set up for himself a pillar, which is in the king's valley, and said, for I have no son to preserve my name. So he named the pillar after his own name, and it is called Absalom's monument to this day. Imagine the arrogance of Absalom. It says he has no sons, and actually Absalom had 3 sons, but probably they died before this. They died, and so it doesn't say how, but Absalom's sons are probably dead now. And so he's setting up a pillar for himself to preserve his name for it, a monument. Oh, hell for King Absalom. But you know what? God took care of this situation, and he's self-centered. What was he? Self-promoting, self-centered, wanted to do things his way, angry. That's what happens when bitterness and anger takes root. So Absalom represents the tragic, high cost of letting wounded pride and rebellion and lust for power to drive one's actions. Friends, don't do other people wrong to try to get power and think you can pull them out so you can rise. God sees that. God understands that. Don't let your woundedness fester into bitterness, to anger, to revenge, to murder. That's what happens, friends. There's a cost. Look at Absalom's life. There's a cost. Think about it. Culminating in a dishonorable death. That's what Absalom's life ended up being. It culminated in a dishonorable death, buried under a pile of stones in the woods. That's what ends up happening. Friends, sin has a cost. So we're looking here. We're going to look some more into this. The heart of David, though. David didn't want his son harmed in any way. But we're going to see David and how bitter it's going to, how it's going to, grief-stricken it's going to cause him in the next episode in a few days, probably Monday. But we're going to look at that and we're going to see. But you can see all through David's life how, man, if he hadn't relied on the Lord, the Lord hadn't been on his side, how his life could have ended long time ago. But friends, God is for you just as well. God loves you with an everlasting love. God's going to protect you. When the odds seem against you, God will send someone. God will send provision your way. So friends, don't lose heart. Be encouraged today. If God be for you, who can be against you? God bless you, friends. We'll see you in a couple days.